I still remember the moment my phone rang that morning because nothing about that day felt unusual at first, and I almost ignored the call like I normally do with unknown numbers. But something made me pause just long enough to answer it. And that small decision ended up changing everything that came after. There was a short silence on the line before anyone spoke, and for a few seconds I thought it was a mistake or a dropped call. But then a man's voice came through, calm and steady in a way that immediately made me uncomfortable. Because it didn't sound like someone guessing or improvising. It sounded like someone who already knew exactly what he wanted to say. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't ask if I could hear him. He just said, very clearly, "Don't trust the man you live with." And for a moment, I actually thought I had misheard him because the sentence didn't connect to anything in my life. It didn't belong to any situation I could recognize. And I remember standing still in my kitchen, holding the phone a little tighter, waiting for him to explain what he meant. But he didn't explain anything. Instead, he continued in the same calm voice and said, "You have 24 hours. Then the line went dead. No warning, no follow-up, just silence. I stayed there for a while without moving, trying to convince myself it was a prank or a wrong number, because that's what your mind tries to do when something doesn't make sense. It tries to reduce it into something harmless, something easy to ignore. But the problem was that I couldn't fully ignore it, because the words kept repeating in my head in a way that felt heavier than normal thoughts. Don't trust the man you live with. At that moment, my boyfriend was in the next room, completely unaware that anything had happened, and I could hear him moving around, doing normal things, and that contrast made everything feel even more strange. Because life around me was continuing exactly the same while something inside me had clearly shifted. I didn't tell him about the call. Not because I was hiding something, but because I didn't know how to explain it without sounding irrational, and honestly, I wasn't even sure what I believed myself. So I just tried to continue my morning as if nothing had happened. But I noticed that I couldn't fully return to normal after that. Small things started to feel different. Not in a dramatic way, not like a movie, but in a quiet, subtle way that you only notice once your attention changes. The way he checked his phone more often than usual. The way he sometimes paused before answering simple questions. The way he turned his screen away when I walked into the room. None of it meant anything on its own, and I knew that very well. But once a thought is planted in your mind, it starts connecting things that were never connected before, and that's when doubt becomes something you can't easily turn off. And I kept thinking about that call. Because if it was a joke, it was a very specific kind of joke. And if it wasn't a joke, then it meant someone knew something about my life that I didn't understand yet. That night I couldn't sleep properly, not because something was happening, but because my mind kept replaying the sentence over and over again, and every small sound in the apartment felt more noticeable than usual. Like my awareness had shifted into a different state. At one point, he came into the room and asked if I was okay, and I said yes immediately, maybe too quickly, because I didn't want to start a conversation I couldn't explain, and I remember noticing that he looked at me a little longer than usual. Not suspiciously, just observant, like he could tell something was off even if he didn't know what it was. And that moment stayed with me too. Because sometimes it's not what people say that changes things, it's the way they look at you when they realize something has changed. The next morning, everything looked normal again on the surface, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was paying attention to things I had ignored before, and I started noticing patterns that I was not sure were real or imagined. But then my phone rang again. Unknown number. And this time, I didn't hesitate. I answered immediately. There was that same short silence again, the same kind that makes you feel like the person on the other end is listening before speaking, and then I heard his voice again, calm and unchanged. "You're still not listening." And in that moment, I realized this wasn't over. I didn't answer him immediately, because something about hearing that same voice again made everything feel more real than before, like the first call could still be dismissed as a mistake, but the second one removed that option completely. And I found myself standing in the same spot, holding the phone, trying to understand what was happening without letting panic take over. "You're still not listening," he repeated again, and this time there was a slight change in his tone. Not louder or more emotional, just more certain, like he was disappointed rather than surprised. And I finally spoke. I asked him who he was, and how he got my number, and what he wanted from me, but he didn't answer any of my questions directly. Instead, he said something that made my stomach tighten in a way I didn't expect. "He is not who you think he is." There was a long pause after that sentence, and I remember sitting down without realizing it, because suddenly my body felt heavier than my thoughts, and I asked him again what he meant, but again he avoided giving anything clear, as if clarity itself was something he refused to offer. Instead, he said, "You've already noticed it. You just don't want to accept it." And that was the moment everything inside me started to split into two directions, because part of me wanted to reject everything completely, to shut the phone and forget it ever happened. But another part of me kept replaying the last few days. The small details I had dismissed, the silence between words, the way certain things didn't feel fully aligned anymore. And I hated that I was thinking like that. Because doubt is not something that arrives all at once, it builds slowly, and once it starts, it doesn't need proof anymore, it just needs space. I told him I didn't believe him. My voice sounded more stable than I felt, but he didn't react to that either. He just said, "Then check for yourself." And the line went dead again. This time I didn't stay still. I moved immediately, without even fully knowing what I was doing, and I checked his things, not because I wanted to find something specific, but because I needed to confirm that nothing was there, that the call was wrong, that my life was still exactly what I thought it was. But what I found was not a single clear answer, it was something worse. It was inconsistency. A folder on his laptop I had never seen before. Messages deleted but not fully erased. A second email account I didn't know about. None of it was enough to prove anything on its own, but together it created a feeling that I couldn't ignore anymore, because it wasn't about one detail, it was about the pattern forming underneath everything I thought I understood. And the worst part was not fear. It was confusion, because I didn't know if I was uncovering something real or if I had been guided into seeing something that wasn't actually there. That night, I didn't confront him. I watched him instead. Not openly, not obviously, just quietly observing the way he moved through the apartment, the way he behaved like nothing had changed, and that normality itself started to feel strange, because now I was the one who had changed, not him. And then, later that night, my phone rang again. Same unknown number. But this time, I didn't wait for him to speak first. I said, "What is this? What do you want from me?" There was a short pause, and then he said something I wasn't prepared for. "I want you to leave before tomorrow." And for the first time, I understood that this wasn't just a warning anymore. It was a countdown.